I hope everyone has enjoyed the forum thus far and making some great connections to continue deepening our work. So again, welcome everyone again back from the break. I am Chriselle Pillay, the Executive Director of the Home Coalition in Houston, Texas. And I am also an NLHIC board on the board. Before we get started with the plenary session on best practices in organizing, we have a few special messages from our members of Congress.
To be with you today. At first, I want to thank you for all the work you do every day. In the midst of an unprecedented housing crisis, you fight to keep families housed, and the value of that just cannot be overstated. For decades, the federal government has fallen short of making the necessary investments in housing, allowing the demand for homes to far exceed the supply. We know that while the housing shortage has impacted families all across the board, its impacts have been felt most significantly by those with the lowest incomes. 7 million. That's the number of rental homes we need to fill the gap for extremely low-income families. Plugging that gap will take big investments like those I call for in my American Housing and Economic Mobility Act. My bill would invest nearly $500 billion in housing, including over $400 billion for the Housing Trust Fund, to build and repair millions of affordable homes. Now, I'm grateful for NLIHC's support for this legislation over the years, and I want you to know I am still in the fight for this. We also recognize that any investment secured for housing will take time to result in new homes, which means more time to meaningfully bring down the housing costs. That's why I'm also prioritizing more immediate tenant protections. I've called on the Biden administration to protect renters from predatory landlords and to use the executive branch's tools to bring down costs for families. The federal agencies have a plethora of powers that can be used to protect renters, and I'll be leading the charge in Congress to make sure they use them. For way too long, the housing needs of American families have gone unmet by the federal government. To avert a more severe crisis and to stem the flow of families into homelessness, it's going to take an all-of-government approach to change course. So I'm going to be fighting to make sure that we do take that all-of-government approach, and I know you will be too. It's an honor to fight alongside you.
Hi, I'm Senator Tina Smith. Thank you for inviting me to your annual conference. I'm grateful for the important work that you all do to create a future where everyone has a place to call home. As the people on the front lines of the homelessness and rental housing crisis, you know that without a safe, affordable, and quality place to live, nothing else in your life works. Not your job, your health, your family, or your education. Everything depends on access to housing. So I thank you for the work that you do every day to serve your clients. Communities across the country are facing an affordable housing crisis, from big coastal cities to small towns and rural places. According to data published by the National Low Income Housing Coalition, not a single state in our country has an adequate supply of affordable rental housing for the lowest income renters. In nearly every part of this country, people face an extreme affordable housing shortage. We're facing the same challenges in my home state of Minnesota, where many communities simply do not have enough dignified, affordable homes to meet demand. This challenge is even more acute for communities of color, for Native people, veterans, seniors, and people living with disabilities. This is an economic issue and a justice issue. As chair of the Senate Housing Subcommittee, I'm working across the aisle to find solutions and make improvements. For example, I'm working across the aisle with Senator Mike Rounds to improve rural housing programs, and I partnered with Senator Thune from North Dakota on bipartisan legislation to help boost Native home ownership. This year, I'll keep on working with you to expand rental assistance and to preserve the affordable, accessible rentals that we have. And I'll also be looking for ways that we can increase the supply of places to rent for people with the lowest incomes. In my housing subcommittee, I'll be holding hearings to find the best ways to help people move from homelessness to supportive housing and affordable homes. So thank you again for inviting me to speak with you today. I'm grateful for the important work that you all are doing to advocate for policies that advance equity and help ensure every American has access to quality, affordable housing. I look forward to our continued partnership on these important issues. So thank you and have a great conference.
Thank you so much, Senator Warren and Senator Smith, for your warm words. Now, as an NLIHC board member and having the pleasure of working very closely with the recipients of the 2019 Organizing Awards, it is my esteemed honor to present this year's Organizing Awards to the winning campaigns. NLIHC's annual Organizing Awards recognize outstanding achievements in statewide, local, or residential organizing that advances NLIHC's mission, prioritize racial equity, and elevate the leadership of directly impacted residents. This year, we celebrate the excellent work of the Illinois Coalition for Fair Housing and Miami Workers Center. Let's take a look at what this year's winners have accomplished.
The National Low-Income Housing Coalition honors the Illinois Coalition for Fair Housing in recognition of its work to enact statewide source of income protections. The Illinois Coalition for Fair Housing is a group of directly impacted community members and advocates committed to making housing access in Illinois equitable and just. Coalition members include tenant leaders, housing and homelessness organizations, disability rights advocates, civil rights and anti-poverty groups, and faith communities. For nearly 2 decades, advocates in Illinois have pushed to close a glaring gap in fair housing law: the lack of protections for low-income people with housing choice vouchers and other subsidies. While the Federal Fair Housing Act prohibits explicit racial discrimination in the housing market, it does not include source of income as a federally protected category. This means that many renters are turned away and denied stable housing because housing providers refuse to accept their voucher as a form of payment for rent. This practice, known as source of income discrimination, is often a proxy for racial discrimination. Studies have consistently shown that Black voucher holders are disproportionately denied housing when compared to similarly situated white voucher holders. People with disabilities are also more likely to face discrimination. Over the years, advocates have successfully secured local source of income protections in some Illinois cities and counties, but more than half the state of Illinois still lacked protections. Even in jurisdictions with local source of income laws in place, housing providers faced relatively minor consequences when charged with local fair housing violations. The pandemic shone a new light on the extent of source of income discrimination and its harms. For example, a Freedom of Information Act request revealed that landlords refused to complete 40% of all applications for the Illinois State Housing Finance Agency's Emergency Rental Assistance Program that used CARES Act funds. Advocates entered the 2022 legislative session with a renewed sense of urgency for source of income protections. The bill, HB 2775, received early support from the Senate and House Black and Latino caucuses. However, the bill faced strong opposition from associations of realtors, bankers, and property owners. Intense negotiations ultimately flipped one of the bill's chief opponents, the Illinois Association of Realtors, to publicly support the bill. The realtors' support swayed the remaining undecided assembly members and secured enough votes for the bill to pass. Governor J.B. Pritzker signed HB 2775 into law on May 23, 2022, and the new protections took effect on January 1, 2023. HB 2775 adds source of income to the Illinois Human Rights Act, making it a civil rights violation to refuse to consider an individual rental applicant because they receive a form of legal non-wage income, including vouchers. The law also protects those seeking to purchase homes using FHA or VA loans or home ownership vouchers, which will help address the racial wealth gap and expand home ownership opportunities for Black and Latino households. The Illinois Coalition for Fair Housing is intentional about empowering and centering the voices of people directly impacted by source of income discrimination, housing instability, and homelessness. The coalition employed a system of weighted votes in its decision-making processes, which ensured that directly impacted leaders could hold the coalition accountable. Directly impacted renters took the lead in the coalition's advocacy. They met with legislators, testified at hearings, and shared their personal stories on social media. Although source of income protections are now the law of the land in Illinois, the coalition's work is far from finished. Coalition members are now focusing on implementation, outreach, and enforcement of the law. The coalition is working with the Illinois Department of Human Rights to inform the agency's rulemaking and guidance for the implementation of HB 2775. Coalition members have also secured funding to fairly compensate directly impacted leaders for their involvement in public education campaigns and peer mentorship for victims of housing discrimination. For its successful advocacy in securing statewide source of income protections in the 2022 legislative session, driven by the leadership of directly impacted residents, we present the Illinois Coalition for Fair Housing with the 2023 Statewide Organizing Award. The National Low Income Housing Coalition honors the Miami Workers Center for its leadership in the campaign for the Miami-Dade County Tenants' Bill of Rights. Miami Workers Center builds power with working-class tenants, workers, women, and families in Miami-Dade County. Through leadership, development, and grassroots campaigns, they seek to transform their workplaces and neighborhoods to win the respect, rights, and resources we all deserve. In late 2020 and early 2021, Miami Workers Center launched a listening campaign to better understand the challenges that tenants were facing during the pandemic. Organizers convened legal clinics and trainings, knocked on thousands of doors, and collectively spoke with almost 1,000 tenants. Organizers and impacted tenants organized meetings in their communities, which created a space to exchange stories, identify similar concerns, and propose solutions. Lack of landlord accountability was a common theme that arose in these conversations. Tenants shared stories of flooding, rodent infestation, mold, broken plumbing, and other dangerous conditions that threatened residents' health and safety. Many tenants had nowhere to turn when their landlords ignored requests for repairs or put themselves at risk of retaliation if they pressed for a safer, more dignified living environment. Tenants' stories and ideas were synthesized into a set of demands for the Miami-Dade County Tenants' Bill of Rights. Miami Workers Center developed a handbook that explains each of the campaign's 6 demands. The handbook features tenant stories, which powerfully illustrate the transformative impact that the Tenants' Bill of Rights would have. When the campaign launched publicly in 2021, organizers identified 2 county commissioners who co-sponsored and championed the Tenants' Bill of Rights package. For months, organizers kept media attention on the campaign with public press conferences and building-level actions against mass displacement. Skyrocketing rent increases in late 2021 and early 2022 also increased public awareness of housing instability. The personal stories of women workers, tenants, and families were at the heart of the campaign. Miami Workers Center organizers prepared dozens of tenants to speak at rallies, testify at county commission meetings, and spread the campaign's message in the media. The Miami-Dade County Commission was set to vote on the Tenants' Bill of Rights on May 3, 2022. Tenants and organizers spent all day at the County Commission's office, demonstrating the strength of the movement. After a full day of debate and some negotiations over amendments, the County Commission voted unanimously to adopt the Tenants' Bill of Rights. The final package contained many of Miami Workers Center's core demands. The Tenants' Bill of Rights allows tenants to have repairs done and deduct the cost from their rent if landlords do not respond to requests within 7 days. It requires tenants to receive 60 days notice before a building changes ownership, requires landlords to provide tenants with a notice of tenants' rights within 10 days of starting or renewing their tenancy, and bars landlords from requiring disclosure of previous evictions on an initial application. In addition, the County Commission formally established an Office of Housing Advocacy that will act as a clearinghouse for tenant rights and housing-related resources. This office was a top priority for tenants. The campaign for the Tenants' Bill of Rights not only achieved an important policy victory, but also laid the groundwork for future efforts to advance housing justice in Miami-Dade County and in Florida. Going forward, Miami Workers Center and its partners will continue to push for the right to counsel for all tenants in eviction court, a campaign demand that was not included in the final package. This ongoing effort will benefit from the strong base of support, increased public awareness, and powerful tenant leadership cultivated in the campaign for the Tenants' Bill of Rights. For its successful grassroots organizing to enact a Tenants' Bill of Rights and develop the leadership of Black and Brown women workers and tenants, we present Miami Workers Center with the 2023 Local Organizing Award.
Such remarkable work. As we just saw in the videos, this year's winners show what we can accomplish when we share our stories, advocate with persistence, and demand bold action from our elected officials. These campaigns also demonstrate what it means to empower leaders who have personally experienced housing instability and to follow their direction in the movement for housing justice. I will now officially present the organizing awards to the representatives from each organization. For their campaign to enact statewide source of income protections driven by the leadership of directly impacted residents, NLIHC honors the Illinois Coalition for Fair Housing with the 2023 Statewide Organizing Award. I invite Sharon Norwood and Michael Chavaria to accept the award. Thank you and congratulations. Now, for their campaign to establish the Miami-Dade Tenants' Bill of Rights, achieved through leadership of Black and Brown women workers and tenants, NLIHC honors the Miami Workers Center with the 2023 Local Organizing Award. I invite Vanny Vedas and Demetria Stratford to accept the award on behalf of the center.
Yeah, I'm good. Yo. That was funny.
So with that, I will turn it over to Courtney Cooperman, Housing Advocacy Organizer in NLIHC, who will moderate a panel discussion with the winners.
That could be right there. Thank you so much, Chriselle, and congratulations again to our winners. It is just such an honor to be up here with 4 incredible organizers and to facilitate this discussion about the best practices that made their victories possible. I'll now turn it over to our panelists to introduce themselves and give a brief introduction of their organization. I will turn it over to Sharon to get us started.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sharon Norwood, and I am the Housing Justice Organizer for Chicago Area Fair Housing Alliance, also known as CAFA. Our mission is to eliminate housing discrimination, and we do this through policy work and organizing, a broad-based correlation building, and education and outreach. People who are directly affected by housing discrimination and housing instability play a central role in all of our campaigns, including in the SOI campaign. We work to ensure that leaders directly impacted not only identify issues, but define solutions. So my role is to bring the voice and expertise of our leaders to housing justice campaigns. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Michael Chabria with Hope Fair Housing Center. How you doing? So when I first joined this campaign, I was working with another group I want to give credit for that gave me the privilege of being a part of this, and that's Housing Choice Partners, which serves only voucher holders. And I also want to take a moment to just recognize that there's other coalition members who are at the conference today. And just over here, you have Faluke Akani with Housing Action Illinois, Eric Sirota with Shriver Center, and Patricia Fran also with Chicago Area Fair Housing Alliance. So, and I say that because what I learned from this campaign is that it takes persistent collaboration to be successful. If you remove any one of the people I just named, or any one of the 100 or so people that made this happen, we would not have been successful. It took all of us together, and collaboration is exhausting and difficult, but it's what it takes to do what we know we need to do. At Hope, we're a fair housing enforcement agency, and what we realized was that we can't enforce laws that don't exist. So we had to shift gears a little bit and fight for laws that were necessary to ensure everyone has the right to fair housing. So thank you for allowing me to be here.
Hi, my name is Demetria Crawford. I'm a tenant organizer at the Miami Workers Center. I organized around Section 8 in HUD. I was born and raised in Miami, in the Liberty City area, and I think about the Bill of Tenant Rights, how I'm proud of us. It was a win for low-income people, my black people, my black, brown, Latino people. So, and I'm thankful for being here.
What's up, everyone? I'm Vani Veras. I'm also a tenant organizer at the Miami Workers Center. I support directly impacted tenants and organizing around issues in their housing, whether it's abusive conditions, discrimination, harassment. And yeah, I joined the center around the beginning of 2021, right when we started the canvassing and like the door-to-door outreach, connecting tenants to like urgently needed resources in the middle of the deadliest pandemic that we've had to date. And yeah, it feels like a fever dream right now being up here, honestly, because just thinking of like everything that we went through, like the leadership the tenants had to take, the risk that they took with, no type of guarantees, no promises made. We never do that. Seeing the way that their leadership really brought about this Tenant Bill of Rights, like this historic legislation in Florida, it's just a privilege, really. It's an honor to have been able to be a part of that process, to support them through that process. And grateful to them and their sacrifices.
Thank you so much. And as you all alluded to in your introductions, people who are directly affected by housing discrimination and housing instability have played a central leadership role in each of your campaigns. Can you talk a little bit more about how tenants and resident leaders have informed the campaign's goals and strategies? And I'll turn it over to Sharon to get us started on this one too.
So our coalition, we were in partnership with like over 130 organizations. And I got to say that endorsing organizations from across the state. Those organizations included Zillow, RAC Illinois, that's the Religious Action Center of Illinois, SEIU, Service Employees International Union, domestic violence organizations, and Centers for Independent Living, just to name a few. We were able to speak to the interests of these organizations and demonstrate why this housing justice issue was important to advancing their interests as well. And so right now we know that the model we use worked, which was borrowed from the past campaigns that CAFA and other coalition members were members of. So our focus now is on ensuring a successful implementation of the law to prevent this from being merely words on paper, but the rights of all people of Illinois.
Thank you. And Devitra, do you want to talk a little bit about the aspects of people with lived experience in Miami?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, sure. Our demands was made up the Bill of Tenant Rights from Real Stories. It was member-based. We had members like a guy named Mr. Wiley. I'm sorry, I'm kind of nervous here. Well, he held his rent. Thank you. Well, he held his rent because of discrimination. We had Marlene, where her landlord was going against her landlord was going. They was like, it was discrimination. They didn't care for her, so they didn't want to accept her rent. And she needed some protection on that. We did a lot of canvassing. We went to the, we canvassed. We went to the eviction list. We showed up over Miami-Dade County to have back-to-back neighborhood meetings where tenants came, bi-weekly meetings. We shared stories. We went to the commissioners where we held press conferences, rallies. We mobilized. We learned from each other. We learned that the tenants like Kansas City, where they did the Bill of Tenant Rights. So that's what we learned from, and we made sure that our members was on the front line. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, looking to the models of successful victories that have happened in other places across the country is a big part of why we're all here today. So the next campaign out there can say, I learned from Illinois, I learned from Miami, like you all did from Kansas City. Mm-hmm. Great. So we talked a little bit about coalition building and partnerships, and I'd love to dig a little bit deeper into that. So Michael, I'll start with you. Could you describe some of the partnerships and coalition building that were really essential to your campaign?
Yeah, so the first thing we did was the reason we were motivated to look at this issue is because of the racial injustices that were playing out through who experienced source of income discrimination. So the first thing we did was we embraced that this was an anti-racism bill. I think that can sometimes be a difficult thing in our political climate because we have a lot of legislators we need to win over who aren't riding that train. But we embraced it full on, and that was our mission. That was how we discussed this bill. But we also recognized that this was an issue that impacted everyone. What we found was that half of all households in Illinois were susceptible to this type of freedom to be discriminated against by housing providers, by the gatekeepers to communities and opportunities. So we built coalitions with those who are serving households escaping domestic violence, with organizations serving those who are at retirement age, with those who are serving families with children, because we know of the importance that housing plays in the success of children. We also built coalition with veterans groups, with VFWs, with former Republican U.S. Senator Mark Kirk, because of his service to the country. We knew that this was a bill that would benefit everybody. We as a coalition embraced that this was anti-racism, but we also embraced that this was anti-other things to other groups, and we coalesced together. We also took care in the structuring of our organizations, of our coalition in the beginning, to hold ourselves accountable through a very, very formal structure with clear rules, clear written agreements that we could hold each other accountable to. Why are you complaining about this? You knew about this before we even took the first step. And why are you complaining that this person has a lot of say in the direction we go? We agreed that those who are directly impacted are steering the ship. We agreed that before we introduce language, it would be stamped by those directly impacted that this will solve the problem that is being experienced. And we agreed that those directly impacted would have a greater vote than those being paid to do the work. So that was just a little bit of the approach that we took.
Thank you. That's such a concrete thing that you can do. Weighted votes, just really put that emphasis on the perspectives of people with lived experience, put that into the rules, put that in the procedure. Thank you for that. Vanny, do you want to talk a little bit about the coalition building and partnerships in Miami?
Yeah, sure. Let me turn this on. Sure. So we had some statewide support from a statewide coalition we were already a part of, FHJA, but really what really added meat to like our coalition building was the local coalition building. Obviously, this was a local legislation. So we seeked out partnerships with local labor unions, other worker centers that we were already in community with, base building organizations, service organizations, different legal partners. We even had a couple of small landlords who were supporting the campaign, folks who saw that we were really just fighting for like the dignity of our people, it wasn't anything too controversial. It's just really that simple. And there were folks who saw that, supported it. And we also identified 2 county commissioners who supported our legislation, who championed it, who collaborated with our legal team and with our member leaders as well, who were a part of the conversations, who were present in those meetings when we were negotiating like the writing of the legislation. We basically already had it written up, honestly. Their attorneys just came in and were checking it out and just making sure that it was like legally up to par for like the local law. But, in meetings, in our like member leader spaces, we were building this legislation out along with our attorneys, we basically handed it to them ready. So just all of that to say, without support of our local partners, we wouldn't have been able to make it happen. Like they encouraged their base to go out and give testimony at different hearings, to participate in our mobilizations, in our rallies. It was a team effort. We really couldn't have done it without that coalition building, which was very, very crucial to our win.
Thank you. I know you've all touched upon a little bit the racial equity aspects of the campaigns and want to talk a little bit about that even further because that's such an important priority for all of our work. So how did you incorporate a racial equity framework and take an intersectional approach to organizing your campaign? I'll turn that over to Devitria.
Our people, my people, poor people, working class people, women with children, immigrants, families, and single mothers. That is facing an eviction in Miami. But there are also experiencing others issues. That is why we invite them to our women's circles, our housing meetings, our what is the other meetings? Domestic meetings. We host sister and struggles to meet their needs, to help meet their needs. We organize whole people. And at the end of the day, people go home and still have their lives with other issues. It is a struggle to try to act and commit to people as long-term projects. Is while some people still go home and they still feel like they've been discriminated against, but we still try to help as much as we can because we know it's hard out here, and we all know housing is a human right.
Michael, do you want to elaborate a bit on the racial equity aspects of the Illinois campaign?
Yeah, so, one thing we did was with our sponsors, again, as I said earlier, not shying away from the fact that this was an anti-racism bill. And I remember being struck when our chief sponsor, Representative Ford, who I heard getting many well-deserved props during that, who just flat out told his colleagues, you're being racist. In the debate, you are being racist. You're being racist towards me, your peer colleague. So that was a really powerful moment to observe someone to put himself out there like that amongst his peers. And then, other things we did, and I really appreciated one of the panels I observed yesterday, one of the organizing panels about this sort of balance of numbers and narratives. And that was something that was a line we tried to figure out how to walk. A lot of us are kind of like policy wonks, or just, we're very interested in the nuts and bolts of how these laws work. And it's often very easy to get caught up in these stories about the statistics, that 50% of the time this, 50% of the time that, this many people. What we wanted to do is we wanted to make sure that people like Sharon, who I met before she was on staff with one of the coalition members, who made the time to go out there and share her story and to be vulnerable in front of strangers and people who are going to judge her, people who were already there having made up their mind about her and others who impacted by this issue. And what we did was we prioritized those stories. We said the statistics didn't work. We've been trying this for 20 years. We need to try something different. COVID, I think, was a moment when narratives became more important to all of us than ever as we became less connected. And that was a difference maker. That really centered race equity because it wasn't folks that looked like me talking about the numbers of the problem. It was folks that looked like Sharon talking about the experience of enduring the problem, about how it impacts children who don't have a voice at the ballot box yet. So that was a big part of the racial equity framing. And then with the intersectional approach, similar to as Vanny was saying earlier, we worked with non-traditional partners. We got Zillow to support us, to come out there. Their lobbyists supported us. They gave us tips. They met with legislators. They provided data analysis so that they can make those arguments that we couldn't, so that they could say, we disagree with source of income discrimination, and we think landlords can still make mountains of profit if people are treated humanely. So that was a little bit of the approach we took.
Thank you. Yeah, coalitions can come from unexpected places. Vanny, I remember you said before that it's kind of surreal to be up here and you've gone through so much. And of course, we all know that no campaign is without its challenges. I wanted to ask, what were the biggest challenges that your campaigns faced and how did you overcome them? And I'll turn that one over to Devitria. About the challenges. What were some of the greatest challenges you faced and how you overcame them?
Okay. It was the challenges. It was really. It was it wasn't really hard. It was the people challenge. I mean, where they was being displaced. They was being displaced. They was being mistreated. I'm looking at my paper. I'm trying to read it by myself. I wrote it somewhere. I'm so nervous.
You're doing so well. Can we get another round of applause for everyone?
It was a struggle. It was a struggle, but we tried to, and it was a long time. It was a. Dang, I'm still reading the wrong thing. I'm speaking from my heart. I wrote it on the paper, but I forgot where it is. Okay. At the end of the day, people goes home and still have to live with conditions. Like I said earlier, it was a struggle trying to like commit to people as long term. Their response, they crisis, someone or either their solutions are not enough and it's disgracing.
Thank you. Michael, do you want to talk a bit about some of the challenges that your campaign faced?
Yeah, so I think the biggest challenge is the same one every campaign faces, and that's compromise. Compromise sucks. It's not fun. It's really difficult. It makes you all hate each other. But we learned from the folks that came before us that were working on this before us that passed the torch, and we knew compromise was inevitable, and it's always inevitable. It is a part of this process. So again, going back to structure, we built our structure to be able to compromise and to be able to survive that compromise so that we could still stand to look at each other and work on implementation once we win. But it was really difficult for us because we, recognizing this, we started with a bill that we knew was really unlikely to pass. It was just so damn good. It had everything we wanted and more. Like we were at the drawing board, we were coming up with new things we never thought of before. And that really made people angry. That really brought the opposition out hot. But it gave us something to work with. It gave us areas where we could make those compromises and know we still crossed the finish line with a strong bill. It was particularly frustrating for us because that perfect bill that we all came up with together made it halfway. We passed the Illinois House in its original state. We got to the Illinois Senate, and a subcommittee, interestingly, our human rights bill was sent to subcommittee purgatory, a subcommittee called property law, which refused to hear our bill, refused to call it to a vote, refused to meet with us, refused to even meet with our sponsors, their colleagues. So we got to the negotiation table, and we realized that if we took an unexpected approach, if we adopted the language that existed in a jurisdiction already, that the Illinois Association of Realtors, one of the most powerful lobbying groups in the state, would actually support our bill. And so our theory was, by the state adopting language that exists elsewhere, the agency that will enforce the bill will look to that for precedent, for guidance. And we knew the case law there was strong. We knew everything that was included, and we also came up with another unexpected strategy. Let's make that county bill that we're modeling after even stronger before the state passes this. So we worked with them to issue guidance on things we had to compromise on, in particular how vouchers would be considered in the calculation of income. So everyone here knows landlords want 3 times the rent and income, but it should only be 3 times the renter's portion because the rest is guaranteed by the wealthiest nation in the world. It's the greatest cosigner you can have, Uncle Sam. So what we said to the county was, let's issue guidance that very clearly spells out how your voucher will be considered as income and how your own income will be counted in that application criteria. And we got them to issue that guidance approved by their board before the state passed the bill. So now we have this strong legislative intent that we can point to as we start to work with the state agency to interpret the bill the General Assembly passed. That was really difficult, it was really frustrating, but that was, I think, the biggest challenge we faced.
Great, thank you. Both of your campaigns were really long-term efforts that culminated in a major policy victory, the victories we're here celebrating today, kind of around the same time last year. I think it was in May for both of you. Could you talk a little bit about the political landscape of your communities in 2022 and how this context affected your campaign? Vanny, why don't you get us started?
Yeah, sure. So like I mentioned earlier, we were in the middle of the deadliest pandemic to date. Folks were losing their homes, losing their jobs, and, not just the usual folks were getting evicted. It was everyone. Everyone was getting evicted. Everyone was losing their jobs. In Miami, we were actually, for the first time in history in Miami, half of the commission was being turned out, the Miami-Dade County Commission. I don't know why there weren't term limits before, but, they're there now. So half of them were being termed out, and also we were in the middle of a midterm election year. And then in Miami, we also have a very conservative political bloc over there with a lot of power. And, a lot of them are landlords, So we understood that, like, the odds were definitely stacked against us, but we also recognized that we were in, like, a very particular political moment, and that the conditions were right for us to move on this campaign. Amen.
Thank you. We had an audience comment, may the odds be in your favor. Appreciate that. And Michael, do you want to talk a bit about your political landscape of 2022?
I promise this is the last question I'm answering. So, we built off the advocacy that occurred over 20 years, right? Our partners, our mentors, they've been working on this for decades. And they built a roadmap. They passed local laws that made it easier to pass at the state level. So we embraced that, and I'm very thankful to everyone who put in that work at a time when it was even harder and when it was even more unsafe. One thing that we did differently with the political landscape is, in the past, there was always this idea that the chief sponsors of the state bill had to be coming from places that didn't already have protections. And that had been tried many times, and it didn't work. And I think there's a lot of logic behind that, but it didn't work. So this time we flipped it on, we flipped it upside down, and we worked with chief sponsors that already had this protection. And I don't know that we saw this coming, but one observation I've made in hindsight is I think it insulated them. Because when they're getting this fierce opposition from landlords who are donating to campaigns who have influence in their district, they're able to say, what are you so worked up about? You already have to follow this law. You're telling me you're not following this law? Like, what's going on here? So it gave them protection to come out and say things like Representative Ford said, you're being racist. This is a human rights bill. This already exists in this jurisdiction, in my district, and despite everything you're hearing, the sky didn't fall. The rents are still going up. This is not hurting landlords. And I think that was a new powerful tool by having these legislators that already had the protections be our chief sponsors. Then the second thing was COVID. As was said in the video, our General Assembly fought hard to dedicate a significant amount of resources to emergency rental assistance during COVID through the CARES Act. And what we found, our agencies were contracted to get the word out about this rental assistance, and we're like, job's done, the word's out, it's on the radio, everyone needs money right now, everybody's looking, everybody knows. The problem is landlords are refusing to accept it. So at the same time, we're seeing landlords on TV crying poverty, that they can't keep up with their rental expenses, with their mortgage, with their taxes. We're able to say, hey, we got this FOIA data that shows that 57,201 times in 2 months, those very same landlords refuse to accept rent. Those are the people crying poverty. Yeah, I agree. And so that was a powerful thing. We were able to go to legislators downstate who don't have constituents with vouchers and say, look, here in your county, 400 people in 2 months had their rental assistance denied. They don't know what's going to happen when the eviction moratorium lifts. You need to do something. This discrimination is obstructing your ability to serve your constituents, and we need to change that. It was just a new dynamic that didn't exist before.
Thank you. Yeah, a sense of urgency that has always been there, but just brought to light even more so. So I know as organizers, we always try to make campaigns, we try to make policy accessible, but both of your campaigns did involve mobilizing a large base of grassroots support around policy ideas that can be, a little bit technical or use some wonky vocabulary. How did you educate the public and generate enthusiasm about your policy goals? Sharon, why don't you get us started on this one?
Okay. First, I got to say to one of our coalition members, Heather Bars, Open Communities, love you. I do see you. Greater Roseland. I got to say, out here supporting. And to, like Michael mentioned earlier, one of the things, personally, because I am a former Housing Choice Voucher participant, I did take it upon myself to, along with one of my colleagues who brought this suggestion to me, to shoot a short documentary about my life, my story as a voucher holder. And with that, we were able to use my story and take it around to other legislators to get them to see the life of a voucher holder and what we actually go through. So I'm very proud of that. And we were able more so to get them to understand and get focused on people's stories and what these anti-discrimination protections would mean for them and their lives. So we always met with all of our allies and potential allies where they were, meaning in some spaces we got technical in the weeds with the nuisances of the legislation. In others, like in more public forums, we focused on the real world impact of the legislation. We work to speak to everybody in their own language of priorities. When recruiting and working with those directly impacted, we didn't frame this as a social justice need, but as the justice you and your family deserve. We were not trying to change the world. We're trying to eliminate this problem that you don't deserve to have to endure. No one should be able to obstruct your power or to choose where or you and your family live. That's your right. We also work to demystify the legislative process and show people through trusting and mutual respect relationships that they have a voice and that they already have the power to bring the change. Importantly, we always created space within the coalition to call out any jargon or to overly technical philosophizing of any problem.
That's great. Yeah. Keep it centered on the human impact. Vanny, do you want to talk a bit about your mobilization around policy?
Yeah. So the same question around like how we demystified it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So our folks are complex people, you know. In Miami, there's folks from all places, all backgrounds. And they've lived really complex lives, and we know that our people have the capacity to understand complex topics, you know. But we definitely relied on popular education tools to be able to, as Sharon said, you know, demystify the legislative jargon, because definitely like all that legalese is, you know, I couldn't understand half of it sometimes. But we know that at the end of the day, these laws were based on their lived experiences, on, you know, the injustices that they were encountering. So we would use like the different case studies to break down like, okay, this specific situation, this is the law that's corresponding to that. You know, this law is corresponding to this person's specific situation. And using folks, you know, their direct experiences to be able to help them understand, like, okay, like this is what like all these legal words mean. It's just, and also like the calling out on the jargon, we definitely, you know, did our best not to like, we want our things to be accessible. We want them to be popular, you know, and using all of that jargon, it's not useful. It's not effective, and being able to like build understanding and also absorption of what we're talking about. And honestly, our folks really, one of the things that we used the most was online Jeopardy to like help break down the material. Folks get very competitive, you know? And learning through the process too. They were just like, oh, damn, you know, I didn't know about this, I didn't know about that. And it's better than having someone just talk at you for an hour, you know? Just, you know, bringing in some type of like competitive element. So yeah, we definitely got creative in that front.
I love that. I'm going to bring that back to NLIHC. We're going to do some Jeopardy. I have one final question. So, of course, we're here celebrating, but the work continues. I'm curious, what are your next steps? How are you using these victories to lay the groundwork for the next steps in your campaigns? And I'll turn it over to Vanny. Why don't you continue with this one?
Yeah, sure. So like it was mentioned in the video, through the process of building the Tenant Bill of Rights, we also identified the need for legal counsel for tenants who are facing eviction, who didn't have the funds to pay for it. But we wanted to focus on that separately instead of having it be a part of the legislative package. And in 2022, we were able to win $2.9 million for eviction diversion funding. Yeah. Yeah, we had a wild year for sure. And really, like, 3 components of that, we call it like the Right to Counsel pilot program. And the goal is to, win like the eventual fully funded Right to Counsel for tenants in Miami-Dade. So with the funding that was given to a program this year, Miami-Dade County will have the ability to represent from 300 cases per year, which was the average, to 900 cases per year or so. Yeah. And obviously the goal is to continue building on that. But the program itself has 3 different components. Funding for the outreach, direct outreach, because that was something that a lot of our members were talking about. They wanted folks to be able to know about this right and to be able to know about their rights and to be able to get connected with the organization as well and continue to build tenant power, So that's a part of the funding that we were able to get, direct outreach. Part 2 was like the processing and like the case management of the cases, because that costs money. Legal assistance, paralegals, all of that, it costs money. So funding for that, and also funding to hire more attorneys to be able to represent tenants. So that is something that we want to continue building on. And of course, with the victory of the Tenant Bill of Rights, we're able to host like Know Your Rights trainings, continue to engage folks in the community, bringing them into the space to also let them know about the other campaigns that we're working on. And then, of course, I'm sure a lot of folks in the room have heard that Miami is like the epicenter of the housing crisis. So rent continues to skyrocket. Our folks are not making nearly enough money to be able to afford it and to be able to live in a dignified manner. But definitely we're keeping our eye on what's happening in Orange County. And like the case that's in the Supreme Court for their rent stabilization ballot, in the Florida Supreme Court, for their ballot. And yeah, keeping our eye on that, but at the same time continuing to, reach out to folks in the community, connect them to needed resources, bring them into our organizing meetings, and do our best to radicalize them into wanting to take risk and organize with us. And also, of course, collecting data to inform future campaigns. And then the V organizes with Section 8 tenants. So on that front, for the Section 8 tenants campaign, we're doing the research right now and like the groundwork to see if we can launch a end to unjust expiration of Section 8 vouchers.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And last but not least, Sharon, why don't you talk a bit about your next steps in Illinois?
Well, for us, doing the outreach and education, we secured coalition funding to support much of this work in partnership with those impacted who can now be compensated for their time through stipends. Training tenants, housing authority staff, housing providers, legal aid groups, and social services, etc. So regularly meeting with the Illinois Department of Human Rights to provide resource and technical assistance and support of a strong implementation.
Thank you. Well, join me in giving one final round of applause to all of our winners. I know I'm feeling inspired, these experiences. I hope that you take all of these lessons learned home. Yes, big standing ovation. I hope you take all of the lessons learned here today home and that they'll inform and inspire your future organizing. Before we go, just quick announcement, it's lunchtime. There are several locations for our buffet lunch, or I think it's box lunches right now. So feel free to spread out and help the lines move quickly. We have one location upstairs and a few down here. We'll meet back here in the Grand Ballroom for our next plenary at 1:15, where we'll hear from HUD Secretary Marcia Fudge in conversation with tenant leaders. Thank you so much.